The first time my mother-in-law called me the poor girl, she didn't even try to whisper it. She said it at the dinner table, right in front of everyone. They all laughed. What none of them knew was that 5 years later, I would quietly become the owner of the company that built their entire fortune. And the moment they found out was unforgettable. My name is Elena. I grew up in a small town in Oregon where money was always tight but love was never missing. My parents were teachers. We didn't have luxury vacations, expensive clothes, or fancy cars. But we had something far more valuable: respect, kindness, and the belief that hard work could change your life. When I moved to Chicago for college, everything felt bigger, louder, and faster. That's where I met Daniel. Daniel was confident, charming, and came from a world that felt completely foreign to me. A world of country clubs, private schools, and family businesses worth millions. Despite the differences between us, we fell in love quickly. But from the very beginning, his family made it clear they didn't approve of me. Before we go further, tell me something in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? I always find it amazing how stories connect people from all over the world. Now let me tell you how everything began to fall apart. The first time I met Daniel's parents was at their massive lake house. I remember standing in their marble foyer feeling completely out of place. His mother, Margaret, looked me up and down with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. "Daniel told us you're a teacher's daughter," she said. Her voice sounded sweet, but there was something sharp hiding underneath. "Yes," I replied. "We're very proud of that." She nodded slowly. How humble. That word hung in the air like a quiet insult. Dinner that night felt like an interview I was destined to fail. His father asked questions about my background. His sister asked if I had ever traveled internationally. His mother asked what my long-term financial expectations were. But the moment that stayed with me happened when I went to refill my glass of water. I heard Margaret whisper to Daniel's aunt in the kitchen. "Daniel has always had a generous heart." A pause. "But marrying the poor girl might be a little too generous." They laughed softly, and in that moment, I realized something. To them, I wasn't Elena. I was just the poor girl who somehow slipped into their world. Daniel always defended me. At least in the beginning, he told me his family was old-fashioned. He said they would come around eventually. So I tried. I attended every family dinner, every holiday, every corporate event for their company. Their business, Whitmore Industries, was a manufacturing company that had been in Daniel's family for 3 generations. To them, it was more than money. It was legacy. But no matter how hard I tried, the nickname never disappeared. Sometimes it was whispered. Sometimes it was disguised as a joke. "Oh, Elena, you probably never tried caviar before meeting us." "Don't worry, dear, these wines can be an acquired taste." And occasionally Margaret would simply smile and say it directly. Our Daniel always had a soft spot for helping the poor girl. The worst part? Over time, Daniel stopped correcting them. The first time it happened, I told myself he didn't hear it. The second time, I convinced myself it wasn't important. But the third time, I noticed something in his expression: embarrassment. Not for his family, but for me. 3 years into our marriage, Whitmore Industries started having financial problems. Manufacturing costs were rising. Several contracts had been lost, and suddenly the family dinners weren't filled with laughter anymore. They were filled with stress. Margaret began making small comments again. "Running a business is complicated, Elena. Some people simply wouldn't understand that world." One night, Daniel repeated something his father had told him. "You know, if you had married someone from a business family, they could have helped." That sentence changed something inside me. For the first time, I realized something important. They didn't just see me as poor. They saw me as useless. And that's when I made a quiet decision. I was going to prove them wrong, not by arguing, not by defending myself, but by building something they could never ignore. I had always loved technology. During college, I had taken programming courses as electives. So after that conversation with Daniel, I started working on a small software idea during evenings and weekends. It was a supply chain management platform, the same kind of system companies like Whitmore Industries desperately needed. For 2 years, I worked quietly. While Daniel's family dismissed me, I was building a startup. While they laughed about the poor girl, I was pitching investors. And eventually, the platform took off. Within 3 years, my company was valued at more than $60 million. But here's the part that changed everything. Whitmore Industries' financial problems had gotten worse. Much worse. Their outdated systems and poor management were driving them toward bankruptcy. And one afternoon, my lawyer called me with news that made me pause. Whitmore Industries is looking for buyers. The room went completely silent, because suddenly, the opportunity in front of me was unbelievable. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I hired an investment firm to represent me anonymously through a holding company. The negotiations lasted months. Whitmore Industries was desperate. Their debts were piling up, and eventually they agreed to sell majority ownership. The night the deal was finalized, I sat alone in my office staring at the documents. My name wasn't on them directly, but the truth was simple. I now controlled their entire company. The same company that had been used for years to measure my worth. The same company whose owners called me the poor girl. But I still wasn't finished, because the moment they discovered the truth had to be perfect. A few weeks later, Margaret invited us to dinner. Whitmore Industries had scheduled a meeting with the new majority investor. They were nervous, curious. Margaret kept speculating about who it might be. Probably some arrogant tech billionaire, she said. Daniel laughed. Well, hopefully they understand the business better than the previous management. I stayed quiet. Dinner ended, and the next morning we all arrived at the company headquarters for the meeting. The conference room looked exactly like I remembered. Large glass windows, polished table, family portraits on the walls. Margaret sat at the head of the table, adjusting her blazer nervously. Let's see who our mysterious investor is, she said. The door opened. The board members entered first, then the legal team, and finally, I walked in. The room fell silent. Margaret frowned. Elena, this meeting is private. I calmly placed the acquisition documents on the table. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. Daniel looked confused. What is this? One of the lawyers spoke. Mrs. Whitmore, allow me to introduce the new majority owner of Whitmore Industries. He gestured toward me. Elena Whitmore. For a moment, no one moved. Margaret stared at the papers, then at me, then back at the papers again. That's not possible, she whispered. I met her gaze calmly. It is. The same woman who once laughed about the poor girl was now sitting across from her boss. But here's the thing, I didn't destroy them. I didn't humiliate them publicly, because revenge wasn't the point anymore.
Respect was.
I restructured the company, brought in modern systems, protected the employees who depended on those jobs. Whitmore Industries slowly recovered, but the family dynamic had changed forever. Margaret never called me the poor girl again. Daniel struggled with the truth for a long time. Eventually, we realized something painful. Our marriage had been built on love, but damaged by pride and silence. We separated peacefully a year later, not with anger, but with honesty. Today, 5 years later, my life is very different. The company is stronger than ever. I mentor young entrepreneurs who come from backgrounds like mine, people who were told they didn't belong somewhere. And sometimes I remember that dinner table moment, the laughter, the nickname, the quiet humiliation. But instead of feeling angry, I feel grateful. Because sometimes the greatest motivation in life comes from the people who underestimate you. They called me the poor girl, but they never understood something important. Being poor doesn't mean you lack value. It just means your story hasn't reached its turning point yet. And sometimes, the people who laugh at your beginning end up working for your future. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.